feet on down to New Orleans.
Laissez le bon temps rouler.
Which is French for let the good times roll. And that is what Mardi Gras is all about. And it's the true spirit and heart of New Orleans, Louisiana as well.
My name is Bill Wiemuth.
And I am Laura Sable.
Welcome to this HistoryHighlights.com presentation about the amazing traditions and history of Mardi Gras.
Samuel Clemens, well, you might know him better as Mark Twain, at the very young age of 23, got to witness Mardi Gras in New Orleans for himself, and he described it this way to his sister, Pamela A. Moffett.
At the corner of Good Children and Chapatula Streets, I beheld an apparition, and my first impulse was to dodge behind a lamppost. It was a woman, a haystack of curtain calico 10 feet high, sweeping majestically down the middle of the street. Next, I saw a girl of 18 mounted on a fine horse and dressed as a Spanish cavalier, with long rapier, flowing curls, blue satin doublet and half breeches trimmed with broad white lace, the balance of her dainty legs cased in flesh-colored silk stockings, white kid gloves, and a nodding crimson feather in the coquettishest little cap in the world. She removed said cap and bowed low to me, and I bowed in return. And then I saw 100 men and women in fine, fancy, splendid, ugly, coarse, ridiculous, grotesque, laughable costumes, and the truth flashed upon me: this is Mardi Gras. I think that I may say that an American has not seen the United States until he has seen Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
I have to agree with that, Bill. What a wonderful description. Mark Twain has a certain way with words, doesn't
Absolutely.
he? Well, Mardi Gras New Orleans brings more than 1 million visitors annually. So there are weeks of celebrations, parties, parades, all culminating on Mardi Gras Day, which is called Fat Tuesday. We'll tell you about that in just a minute. It was an ancient celebration brought over by French immigrants to New Orleans 3 centuries ago. In 1875, Governor Wiemuth signed the Mardi Gras Act, making Fat Tuesday a legal holiday in Louisiana, and it still is to this very day. So let's explore some of the highlights of this famous tradition.
The history of Mardi Gras around New Orleans starts pretty early. In 1699, there were some French explorers, 2 brothers, Bienville and Iberville, leading an expedition up the Mississippi River's mouth. About 60 miles below where New Orleans now sits, they set up a camp on the west bank of the Mississippi River on March the 3rd of 1699, and that was the day that Mardi Gras was being celebrated back in France. So in honor of that important day, Iberville named that site Point de Mardi Gras, which it still retains to this very day. Well, the French headquarters at that time in the Gulf Coast was around Mobile, Alabama, and as early as 1702, the French had established the first organized Mardi Gras celebration tradition there in what was eventually to become the United States. New Orleans was founded in 1718, began to hold celebrations of different kinds. The first documented Mardi Gras parade was held there in 1737. It now is a celebration primarily all along the Gulf Coast, from Texas all the way across to Florida. Comes in lots of different styles and shapes and different forms of celebration.
But it's always elaborate. Elaborate parades, elaborate masked balls, exquisite costumes, and elaborate invitations even, from the beautiful to the bizarre.
All kinds of masks and costumes and elaborate regalia, and it all goes back to a long tradition. Let's learn a little bit about the history of Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras began long before Europeans set foot here in the New World. You know, in middle part of February, even the ancient Romans celebrated a festival called Lupercalia. It was a circus-like festival. And as Rome began to move towards Christianity, they tried to blend the old pagan rituals into Christianity to make an easier transition. So those celebrations that happened around that time became part of the merriment before the Lenten period leading up to Easter. Matter of fact, even the Latin word that derives from what we now call carnival, which was carnelevare, was derived literally from the Latin that meant to lift up meat, to raise meat. You see, a lot of Catholics during the Lenten season will abstain from meat, sometimes on certain days, sometimes all together. And so right before they'd head into Lent, they'd have a feast, literally to lift up the meat and eat and have a feast, Carnival. Well, Carnival is an important celebration in Anglican and Catholic European nations, France, Spain, Sweden, Germany, Italy, all across Central and South America and throughout the Caribbean. It is a big festival, and it culminates on what is known as Mardi Gras,
which translates from French to mean Fat Tuesday. That goes along with a lot of what you're talking about there, Bill.
That's right. The Mardi Gras is actually kind of a season for a lot of folks that begins on January the 6th. So let's break this down for you. On the Christian calendar, the 12th day after Christmas, known as Twelfth Night, or also known as the Epiphany, or King's Day, was the day supposedly that the wise men came and visited baby Jesus and brought the gifts there to the manger. So here's how they work out Mardi Gras' date. It's tied to Easter. And you may know that Easter can fall in all different kind of times of the spring. So here's the breakdown as I have finally figured it out. I'll give you the full definition, then I'll try and explain it to you.
I'm glad you can explain this.
Mardi Gras can occur on any Tuesday from February the 3rd through March 9th. Mardi Gras is tied to Easter, which falls on the first Sunday after the full moon that follows the spring equinox. Makes sense, right?
Gotcha.
All right, so here's what that really means. The spring equinox is the middle date between winter and summer. It's the beginning of spring. It usually falls right around March the 21st. So you go to the spring equinox, March the 21st. The first full moon after that, and then the first Sunday after that first full moon after the spring equinox, that's Easter, all right?
Okay.
Every year. No matter when the full moon falls, you go to the next Sunday, and that's Easter.
Okay.
From Easter, you go back 47 days, and that's when Mardi Gras falls on that Tuesday.
Okay.
That gives you 40 days of Lent, plus the 7 Sundays that are included in that. So 47 days total, 40 days of Lent. Generally, for a lot of Catholics, Sunday cannot be a day of sacrifice because it's a day of celebration.
Oh, right.
So the Sundays don't count into the Easter Lenten period. So that, and here's the interesting thing about how that structures, is from the festival that would happen around January the 6th on 12th night on the day of the Epiphany to Easter, that makes it where Mardi Gras falls about in the middle, you know?
Sure.
So it's kind of a holiday to plop right down in the middle, and again, it kind of tied into those old celebrations, all right?
Wow. I mean, you kind of need a doctorate to
Yes.
to explain that.
Whenever they
so
tell me
impressed.
it is, that's the day I'm going to celebrate.
That's what we do. We just Google it and it tells us. Oh, that's great. So, of course, this is all going back to French heritage. I mean, Mardi Gras has been celebrated in Paris since the Middle Ages, where it was a major holiday. I mean, today's rural, oldest forms of Mardi Gras still practiced in parts of the States. And what's that lovely word?
Courier.
Courier. That's a beautiful word. Courier is a French word for a house-to-house run. This reminds me kind of caroling in a way.
You know, it really ties into a lot of those same traditions of wassailing or caroling, going house to house, getting treats, getting a drink. In this one, they would get ingredients that eventually they'd put into a great big stew, make a soup, and have the whole neighborhood
like gumbo.
Like a big gumbo.
Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that idea. So house to house, I guess you'd call it begging for the ingredients and reveling, and there'd be a dinner and a dance afterwards. So the pre-Lenten masked balls and festivities were common in New Orleans while it was under French rule. So as early as 1703, the French held a type of Mardi Gras celebration in Mobile, as you were talking about, that being the first place they were. And not to New Orleans until 1718. And as Bill mentioned, that first parade documented in New Orleans was in 1737.
So in our Louisiana Purchase story, another talk I highly recommend, you get a chance to learn more about the changes in ownership of the Mississippi River Valley and the Port of New Orleans. Long story short, the Spanish get control over New Orleans. France gives it away to them in 1762. They move in 1763. But a couple of decades after that, in the 1780s, there were reports that were submitted to the government that raised concerns that during the Mardi Gras season, slaves and free people of color were masking, wearing masks, and mingling while passing through the streets in search of festivities and parties and dance halls. And so masking by black people in New Orleans was banned. And the prohibition was extended to all masks even a few years later. They just decided it wasn't a good idea. Well, the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory and New Orleans from France after they got it back in 1800. We bought it in 1803. Louisiana purchased. Don't miss that great story. And still under U.S. rule, this masking was banned until 1823, another 2 decades later. Finally, the Creole population there convinced the governor to permit masked balls. It took another 4 years before they were able to convince them to allow masking again in the street. So it was almost a half of a century where masked parades and partying out in the streets were outlawed. Well, these public celebrations, these parades of Mardi Gras centered around maskers on foot, in carriages, on horseback. For a long while, they were very informal and got a little rowdy. As a matter of fact, especially during the 1840s and 1850s, when there was a lot of tension in the country, violent behavior broke out quite often, and some in the community even called for the festivities to be canceled. Thankfully for all New Orleanians, in 1857, a group of New Orleans businessmen helped kind of save Mardi Gras. They formed what was called the Comus organization, and they demonstrated that with proper planning and organization, these festivities could be held safely. So Comus is the oldest continuous organization of New Orleans Mardi Gras festivities, and that group will bring about a lot of firsts that still are a part of Mardi Gras celebrations in New Orleans to this day. These groups had secret memberships. They were like a private club. They funded and promoted all of these events out of their own pockets. They developed the term crew, Krewe, as a fancy spelling for the crews, the groups that would put these together. They organized parades with themes, and the floats would have these elaborate themes and tableaus and decorations. There would be a ball after the parade. Those traditions are all still part of the culture down in New Orleans. That all starts with the Comus organization back in the middle part of the 1800s.
Now, in 1870, this was the first recorded account of the Mardi Gras throws.
Ooh, throw me something, mister!
That's right. I mean, these items, going back then, who knows what they were throwing, but they've kind of gotten them down to, of course, the beads. They throw doubloons, cups, homemade trinkets. There's toys thrown. Oh, we've picked up all kinds of fun things on these parade routes along the way. And these beads come directly from some of those Mardi Gras parades over the years than when we spent time in New Orleans. Now, here's another Mardi Gras tradition called the king cake. Now, it began as the queen cake. Why did they switch it to the king cake, Bill? I'll tell you. It's probably the queen that baked it for the king, maybe. But in 1871, the 12th night revelers began the custom of presenting a young woman with a golden bean hidden inside a cake.
It just doesn't seem like a good idea.
It seems like a bad idea. But if you know you're expecting that someone's going to get this bean, I think it's okay.
That's true.
The young woman who found the bean would be the first queen of Mardi Gras.
Boy, I love a king cake.
Oh, king cake's good. Okay, so nowadays it's like a brioche dough, cinnamon, glazed with purple, green, and gold sugar. It's kind of like a big cinnamon roll, but with the Mardi Gras colors on it. And then they hide a small plastic baby.
Which is even creepier.
And if you find the baby, you get to perhaps buy the next cake or even host the next party or maybe make a visit to the dentist. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true. Got to be careful biting into those. So Laura mentioned the colors. Let's talk about how that comes into the Mardi Gras tradition, which ties into another tradition called Rex. So 1872, a group of New Orleans businessmen and civic leaders invented a king of carnival called Rex. And this was also to promote tourism, but also to recognize a big special occasion. That Mardi Gras 1872, a Russian royal, the Grand Duke Alexis Romanov, was attending Mardi Gras there in New Orleans. So they thought this would be a great way to kind of make it a real big celebration. And they even took the Romanovs' family colors of purple, green, and gold and made those the official carnival colors. And the colors over time have become symbolic of different traits. The purple is to represent justice. The gold stands for faith. The green stands for power.
Aha! Oh boy, it gets wild during these celebrations, doesn't it?
Boy, that's probably the main thing Mardi Gras is known for, is big crowds, crazy, wild behavior. And let me tell you, that goes back a long time. Here's one we found from 1889 when the local paper, the Times-Democrat, published an article outraged over, quote, the degree of immodesty exhibited by nearly all female masqueraders seen on the streets.
My God, were they showing their ankles?
Probably so.
They show a lot more nowadays.
Yeah, both sexes, men and women, are very comfortable not wearing a lot of clothing.
Yes.
Sometimes at the Mardi Gras parades. There are, by the way, the wild, crazy, intense parades that happen in the French Quarter District, Bourbon Street, Canal Street, down that area. And then there are neighborhood parades, which like run out along St. Charles, along the trolley line, where the families can come out and have a little tamer opportunity to get their piles of throws.
Many of those happen even during the day, not necessarily late at night. So.
I mentioned these were private organizations. They still are. And so as a result of this oftentimes exclusivity, the blacks in New Orleans that had come from Africa, from the Caribbean, all through that region, organized their own club. In 1894, the original Illinois Club, it was called. It was the first black Mardi Gras organization. Women followed suit 2 years later with Les Misterrousses.
Les Misterrousses, I like it.
And that organization was the first female-only organization as well.
Now, Mardi Gras has struggled over the years, had ups and downs. I mean, during times like Prohibition, oh my goodness, I can imagine. It was much less festive, maybe a little more on the sly there. And the Great Depression, absolutely. It was also canceled during the Civil War and both World Wars. But then it started to kind of ease its way back up again. We get into the late 40s and they had grand parades. Favorite son, Louis Armstrong, was the king of the Zulu parade and was pictured on the cover of Time magazine. Then we get up into the 60s, and there was a whole new group that started up, a major one called the Bacchus Crew. And they started to really get opulent with gigantic floats, started to attract Hollywood celebrities. Danny Kaye riding as a king one year, and they would nominate a different king every year, and usually someone pretty famous.
You know, the exclusivity of these groups over time has been a political struggle, and it finally came to fruition in 1992. It took that long. The city council finally moved to require all crews parading on public streets to accept members regardless of race, handicap, sexual orientation. Originally, they discussed gender as well. I will let you know when the law was finally passed, gender was taken out of the regulations because both the men-only crews and the women-only crews didn't want either of the other. So they said, let's have some crews that are sex only, male or female. So they kept that. I'm sad to report there are some of the crews that decided they would stop parading rather than allow minorities to be admitted into their organizations. Today, there are about 50 different crews, and each year during that Mardi Gras season, from early January all the way up until Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras Day, there can be 70 or more different parades scheduled in different neighborhoods all around the town. As Laura mentioned, it attracts a lot of tourists throughout that entire 2-month season, and it can impact the economy locally up to $500 million of economic impact from all of the tourists coming in, hotels and food and all of that as well.
Of course, we do have to mention with 2020, last year, the Mardi Gras event was considered a possible super spreader of COVID-19. And so they did decide to cancel very early on the Mardi Gras celebrations for 2021. But this is a very adaptable city. This is a city that will not be put down.
They will find a way to have a party.
Find a way to have a great time. They party during hurricanes. I mean, that's New Orleans for you. And the local folks have come up with some really unique ways to celebrate Mardi Gras, including what they're calling house floats or home floats, where they're decorating the fronts of these beautiful mansions, these beautiful homes along some of the busiest streets in New Orleans, decorating them like a float, like a parade float. Their yards are decorated. Good for New Orleans.
So creative.
For doing this, and I'm sure lifting the spirits of everyone who lives there.
I guess historically, the parade came by you,
yes,
and now you are the parade going by the floats that stay still on the home porches.
It's all about adaptability, right?
Hey, one thing I think is really worth emphasizing is that all of this festivity and parades and all of this are organized by these private civic groups, and they are completely funded by their members. This is true civic pride going on in New Orleans. It does make a tremendous impact on their culture and on their economy. And as a result, a lot of times in New Orleans, this is called the greatest free show on earth. All you got to do is step to the curb and you are guaranteed to have a good time.
Well, maybe you'll get a chance to experience Mardi Gras in New Orleans. It's something not to be missed for sure. Thanks for joining us to learn a little bit more about Mardi Gras.
There is that great French phrase that New Orleans still hangs on to almost as a mission statement, laissez le bon temps rouler, which means let the good times roll. That's the spirit of New Orleans. That's the spirit of Mardi Gras. And the great Louis Jordan did a song version of that phrase back in 1946. It's a great one. Hey everybody, let's have some fun. You only live once, so when you're done, you're done. So let the good times roll.
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 I don't care if you're young or old. Let's get together, let the good times roll. Well, don't sit there mumbling and talking trash. If you want to have fun, you gotta spend some cash. Let the good times roll.
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 I don't care if you're young or old. Let's get together, let the good times roll. Well, hey everybody, Laura and Bill is in town. I got $1.25 and I'm just raring to clown. Don't let nobody play me cheap. I got 50 cents more than I'm gonna keep. So let the good times roll.
Let the good times roll.
Let the good times roll.
Let the good times
I
roll.
don't care if you're young or old. Let's get together, let the good times roll. Well, no matter whether it's rainy weather, birds of a feather, got to stick together. Everybody get together and let the good times roll.